Hello everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Think Tank. I want to talk about the George Zimmerman trial. This has been all over the news for a very long time, and I've always been very interested in detective work, court cases, and I'm going to give you an opinion about the case, and I'm also going to give you my prediction. Now, if you look at this particular case, it's just very interesting. What's going on, the witnesses, how it happened. It's unconventional, comparable to most murder cases, because this case is a case about self-defense. And the most important thing in a court case, to prove one's innocence or guilt, is the forensics. You have to look at the forensics. So I'm going to ask you, if you can, to put aside any biases or any opinions that you already have, and look at this case from an unbiased perspective. Pretend that you came from a different planet, you have no race and no gender. You're just completely focused on the case at hand and looking at the evidence. If you take the forensics in this particular case and you match it up with the witness's testimony, it's like two pieces of a puzzle coming together to complete the puzzle. Now, forensics comes first, because forensics never lie. Forensics are not biased. Forensics have to corroborate the defense's claim of self-defense. What's very interesting about this, fascinating, is that when you look at forensics, it usually proves or disproves a person's guilt that's denying the act. In this case, it's the opposite. The person claims that they committed the act, but it was done in self-defense. So now the forensics have to be used in a different form. So they have to be used in a different direction. They have to be used to corroborate what the defendant is claiming. And it's just really interesting. If you look at the forensics, you see the injuries that he sustained to the back of the head, consistent with him being on the ground. Maybe not smashed against the concrete, his head being smashed against the concrete, but consistent with at least rolling patterns, that they were on the ground and he was on the bottom. Because I don't see similar cuts to the front of the head, which would mean maybe he's on his back, which is also in a bad position to be, but it's consistent in the way that he said it happened. Ballistics. Look at the ballistics. But what you do have is powder burns, which is consistent with a very close range shot, which is consistent with his story. He fired the gun when the man was on top of him. And another thing is, if you look at Trayvon Martin, he was face down on the ground, which is consistent with Zimmerman sliding him off, which is the easiest way to get him off. His body obviously went limp or slowed down after he was shot because he was seriously injured. So peeling him off, pushing him off, he's going to be face down on the ground. Consistent with his story once again. And the broken nose. Consistent with the type of strikes that he was taking while he was on the bottom. So the injuries corroborate his story. Now you take the witnesses. Look at the prior witnesses that we've had. The past few witnesses, if you look at their star witness, who was this lady named Gentel, you know, her testimony, first of all, was very difficult to understand. She was talking in some sort of slang, and she was murmuring in the microphone. It was like watching paint dry and like pulling teeth to get her to answer questions. And, you know, she was even getting annoyed when she was asked to repeat what she answered. She should be used to being asked that based on the way she talks. If she always talks this way, which I don't know. But the point being is one thing that's the truth, that she told the truth about, is that she was talking to him on the phone and she was the last person to speak to him. However, a star witness that didn't see anything. Usually when you think witness, you're thinking somebody saw something. She didn't see anything. This is just someone that's been talking to him on the phone. So she can say anything. It's describing just words. She mentioned she heard grass sounds. I mean, how could you know what a grass sound is? I mean, even someone that's an expert with sounds, I guess on the phone, it's very difficult to tell what that might have been. And the way she was describing it, that she mentioned that Trayvon Martin said something like, "Get off me," it's not consistent. With him, the forensics doesn't match that. The forensics don't match Trayvon Martin being on the bottom. Now, it's possible there was some sort of, the altercation moved around, maybe they were rolling on the ground or something, but he doesn't have injuries consistent with him being on the ground and being attacked. What is consistent is that he had injuries to his knuckle, which is consistent with what happened. He was striking George Zimmerman, and this will cause a knuckle injury. Especially the head is a very hard object, and if it's struck, it can cause a knuckle injury. A hand can break like that. Many broken hands happen when people use them to punch someone. So if you look at the witness's testimony, it has to match with the forensics. The testimony doesn't match the forensics. Besides the fact that she was perjuring herself, I mean, she admitted that she lied about 2 things, I believe, when I was watching it. So I don't know how credible she was, but the bottom line, it matches up. Now, I'm going to talk about the witness, which was the most compelling, and that was Mr. Good. My goodness. You know, when I first started to watch it, I said, wait a minute. When I first started watching this guy's testimony, I said, this guy is an unbelievable witness for the defense. But then I found out this was state witness. I said, how does it be? I mean, this guy is extremely good at the defense. This guy in case the defense was testimony. I mean, he was the complete opposite because he had the jury interested. I mean, could you imagine if you're a juror listening to this star witness, this Gentel? Imagine sitting. You have to really imagine what it's like. You have to put yourself in the shoes of a juror. You're sitting down. You can't eat. You can't talk. I don't know if you're allowed to stand up. You're stuck there and you have to listen to this stuff. The only thing that can happen is their mind is going to wander. Maybe they're thinking about their family, their job, when they're going to go home, how long this is going to take. They're tuning out. And that's not what the prosecution wants. They want the jurors to be intrigued. They want them to listen. They want them to take notes. How can they? How can they listen to this? I mean, you have to put yourself in their shoes. I could hardly listen to her. It was so difficult and annoying. I only got bits and pieces of it. It was so difficult to hear her. The prosecution mentioned to her that you have a soft voice. Bring the mic closer. It wasn't the voice. I heard the voice. I couldn't understand the words. She was mumbling. She was murmuring. Listen, you have to get the jury interested. The jury's tuning out. How could her testimony have an impact on them? But now you listen to this guy, Mr. Good. I mean, he was very easy to listen to. His voice was very clear. He was very intelligent. I mean, I remember that when he said, that's correct, and when he answered questions, and then after a question was asked, he said, incorrect. I remember when the prosecution asked him a question about his house, he mentioned married, and that's the neighbor. So the prosecution mentioned, oh, I don't want you to get in trouble with your wife. I mean, he apologized. He was so, I mean, he seemed more focused than the lawyers. He was such, I haven't seen a witness this good. I mean, I've seen court cases before. This witness was superb. And he was very consistent about what he said. I mean, he wasn't changing his story. I don't know how the prosecution, because this guy had a deposition, I don't know how they could bring this guy up and be confident. I mean, they tried to discredit him. It was impossible. I mean, he was just a superb witness, this guy. And here's what really got my attention. He said that the guy on top was throwing punches MMA style. Now, if you've seen my videos before, I've spoken a few things about MMA in the past, haven't I? So that really got my attention. And the way he was describing it, he mentioned a straddle position. I'm like, wait a minute. He means a full mount. And that was very powerful. I mean, a full mounted position. And in addition to that, he was throwing strikes. I mean, he mentioned the downward movement of the arms. He didn't say that he saw the punches hitting the face, but if you think about this, I mean, this is very powerful. And obviously the forensics proves that he was getting hit, so that makes up for what wasn't seen. Now, and here's something very important for the defense, and I think they should do this, because they always bring experts into the courtroom. They should get a mixed martial arts fighter to explain what a mounted position and ground and pound is, and explain how difficult it is to get out of a mounted position. And this is very powerful. I think they should get an MMA fighter, a guy who has good ground skills, such as a man like Randy the Natural Couture. You know, he would be a very good guy to go in there, a guy who's very experienced, who knows the ground game as good as anybody, and he could really explain it. I saw the defense attorney went down on the ground and tried to explain it, but you need two people down there. You need a fighter to explain what it is. They should show in the courtroom what it is and explain really what it is. And the reason I'm talking about this is for the defense, is because the prosecution is trying to argue that the use of deadly force wasn't warranted, that he was profiling Trayvon Martin. They're also trying to argue that the injuries weren't as serious, but the point being is, you have to look at not just that he was being hit, it's also he was trapped. That's the importance of getting an MMA fighter there to explain that a full mount is the most dominating position to have on an opponent on the ground. So not only Zimmerman was getting beaten up, he couldn't get away. I mean, if he was getting beaten up standing up, right? Maybe he could run. And also the defense is more, there's more of a defense. The head movements, moving back, moving forward, holding his hands up. But on the ground, it's very difficult. In a full mounted position, the head doesn't have much movement because it can't move back. So it's very difficult to move, and your body, you're pinned. So if you put yourself in his mindset, trapped and getting hit, where's the way out? See, and the fact that the witness opened the door to MMA is why they should bring a fighter in there to explain that. And here's something else that's interesting. The prosecution was trying to argue that, you know, the sounds. He said, did it sound like, prosecution asked, does it sound like this? Now the thing is, this is another reason why you bring an MMA fighter in. You can't hear these sounds. Sounds you hear, punches, are sometimes standing up. Like, for example, when Fedor knocked out Brett Rogers, that was a loud shot because it's standing up. A lot of momentum is going behind the punch, and it could create a very loud sound. But ground and pound, there isn't that much momentum, like an overhand right, because you don't have the body, the arm, fully extended, coming all the way across, and the body moving forward. With ground and pound, it's arms coming down and punches going down. So the impact isn't as great, but they're coming down in bunches, and the impact is very significant. Because, of course, the opponent is pinned. So he doesn't have the movement that he has when he's standing up. And the point being is that you don't hear the sounds like you do when you're standing up. If you watch an MMA fight, you notice ground and pound. When was the last time you actually hear the punches? Of course, you have the crowd, and there's other things in the area which are making noise, people sitting next to you, which prevent you from hearing things. And in this situation, I mean, he was far enough away not to hear it. I think he was around 15 feet away, and then of course it was raining. So the rain also would dampen the sounds. So you have to understand that. So they're asking him, what sounds did you hear? And his question made a lot of sense. He said he didn't hear the sound. Because how could you hear it? With the rain, you're in the street. There may have been other noises which were masking the sound. And here's another thing to look at. Trayvon Martin had a reach advantage on George Zimmerman. He was taller. So if he's on top, he has a dominant position. He has Zimmerman trapped, and when he's throwing punches down, it makes it even more difficult for Zimmerman to react, possibly trying to throw punches of his own, because his arms are shorter. And an MMA fighter would be able to demonstrate this more specifically. Very interesting that MMA came up here, and I think the defense should use this. And it's something that's interesting because the jury is all women. The lady friends that I have, I can tell you right now, they are horrified by MMA. They don't like it. They don't identify with it. They ask me, why are you watching this stuff? They just get really jittery about it. It's just not a girl thing. Maybe some women like it, but the women I know just don't like it. They don't identify with it. They're just horrified by it. They don't like it. Certain things are guy things, and certain things are women things. You know, guy things. Guy things are MMA, the Three Stooges. You know, women aren't into that stuff. It's just a guy thing. And the point is, if they really take this and show what's going on, and the women jurors are looking at this stuff, you know, they'll really understand, oh boy, I mean, this is the type of position that he was in. They have the MMA fighter there, and then they have the witness trying to corroborate that this is what it looked like. You know, this is very substantial. And it can be convincing. So that's something to look at for the defense. But after hearing his testimony, I can tell you right now, I mean, his testimony was explosive for the defense. And just looking at the forensics and looking at his testimony, it just goes together. And I don't see second-degree murder here. I don't see manslaughter here either. And the prosecution is also trying to argue that Zimmerman profiled Martin and he was following him. But that's not a crime. If someone follows somebody in the street, for whatever reason they want to follow them, that's not a crime. So how can that constitute murder or manslaughter? I just don't see that here. I mean, that's one thing where the state has a lot of power and has the upper hand. They overcharge. They set the bar high, then they have lesser charges under there, and they see if the jury might bite at one of them. But you have to understand where the defense has the advantages is that it's beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, that's all that's needed here, and I think there's a lot more than just doubt. I mean, it seems it's just a strong case. The way Zimmerman was describing it, the injuries and the forensics, it just seems to go together like a puzzle. If you're a juror, you can come to that conclusion. Now, with all this being said, I can tell you right now, jurors are morons. I mean, there's a lot of stupid people in America, and jurors, they seem to be at the bottom of the heap of stupidity. And you could just see that with past court cases. So, with all this being said, anything can happen. You know, I'm not going to hold my breath, but I can tell you right now, if the jury has some sort of intelligence, I just see this as a self-defense type of case. Unless something else comes up. If they have some other witness that comes up that saw something before they got to the ground, that saw something which was instigated by the defendant, that's different. But I just haven't seen that yet. And according to what I've been seeing, this Gentile was their star witness. So if she's the best that they can offer, I don't see how they could win this case, because she was a dreadful witness. But anyway, you know, the whole thing's a tragedy. It's really sad what happened here. Anything, you know, it's a real tragedy. I mean, it's sad. But the bottom line is, if you look at this case, like I said, from an unbiased perspective, it just seems like this is a case of self-defense. And my prediction is that he will be acquitted. And as far as the media, they failed miserably by trying to bring race into this case. I mean, obviously, if you look at Zimmerman, I mean, he's not white. He doesn't look white. So what is this, a Hispanic man that shot a black man? I mean, how are they going to make this a case of race? I don't know what they were thinking. And I was trying to figure out, why would they bring a case like this to trial? All they had to do was look at the depositions, and they would see that this case is starting to look like self-defense. Or maybe offer him a plea. I don't know. I don't even know if they did that. I don't think they did. But it just doesn't make sense. But I was thinking about it. This case happened to coincide with all the gun control talk in Washington. And I figured that, you know, it could be a trial against the Second Amendment. Because think about it. If Zimmerman is found guilty, you know, people are going to think twice about firearms, about protecting themselves. They'll say, oh, look what happened to George Zimmerman. I don't want to end up like that. Because think about this scenario. Let's say Zimmerman was a cop. Do you think he'd be on trial for second-degree murder right now? Same situation happens, but he happens to be a police officer. And if you really think about it, the strongest proponents for gun control believe that police should have the guns. So, I mean, you have to think about that. And if this case is about race, the defense was trying to say that this Gentile, who was the star witness, she mentioned that Trayvon Martin said, a creepy cracker. And think about it. I mean, George Zimmerman is not white, so was he making a comment against a Hispanic man? So, you know, who's racist here? I mean, race should have never been brought in this case. It was the media that was bringing this up. And it's really funny. The media knows that Americans are stupid. You know, they could just bring this up. They could make the case about race, and then they could just get involved in the case and cover it because they say, hey, you know, Americans are stupid. They have a short attention span, have a short memory span. They'll forget what happened, and we'll just cover the case, and we'll do it from a perspective that it's a big court case, has a lot of coverage, and let's just, you know, continue with it. So it'll be forgotten and forgiven. So, you know, that's just the way it is with the media, and that's the way it is with people. But anyway, it's a very interesting case. A lot going on within the case. I would like to know your thoughts about the prosecution, about defense. Do you think Zimmerman is innocent or guilty? I would like to know your thoughts. Please leave your comments. Please like up the video. Please subscribe. And thank you for tuning in.